Coming up on a new edition of Wonder Room, Week 2 is come and gone, and the league is really starting to take shape. What shenanigans did Kitakami get up to themselves on primetime this time? And old rivals Kobe and Reem go at it for the first time since Season 5. Torway and Goldenrod scrap it out, both desperate for a win, and can Big Bluff find a big win against the hot-handed Mimikyu? A bunch more 3-game sets, the beginning of interleague play, and a free agency week for the ages. Hold on to your hats and check those stats. Wonder Room starts now. Hello everyone and welcome back to Wonder Room. I'm your host King Vasser. With week 2 behind us, this now means that we are officially a third of the way through the season, and we're really starting to see some trends take place. Which teams are really truly going to be contending for playoff spots down the line. It also means that we saw the beginning of interleague play this week, and as we get into these set recaps, you're going to see some unique matchups that we're only going to get to see once a season, provided those teams don't actually make it to the finals and see each other again. We've got a lot to cover in today's episode, including the largest single week of free agency that we have seen in NWBA history outside of the dreaded Season 4. So let's not waste any more time and get right into today's action. Kitakami and Castelia City on versus Seeker. Doxbun and Serena the leads, and early on this Doxbun actually proved to be quite a problem for Serena. Gets the first KO of the battle on turn 6, allowing Raichu Alola to come in, take advantage of the switch out, and get off a nasty plot. So that's a good read there by Kitakami, and because the Crook is not scarfed, goes down to a single surf. So in comes Rillaboom, and is able to get the KO on Raichu Alola, but not after Raichu sets up the electric terrain with that terrain extender. So now Iron Lead is able to come out, and that side blade is doing massive damage. Booster attack, Life Orb, one-shots the Rillaboom, and then Wild Charge nearly one-shots the core, which barely holds on, gets that KO with the U-turn. So Kitakami's electric terrain stuff isn't really able to make the most of their turns, and then you see that the Rotom is actually scarfed. Darkrai picks up the KO on Doxbun, but it's only a matter of time. You see that Toxapex is able to live the Psychic and get up the Toxic Spike. So now Aloe and Mimikyu in the back are going to have to hold that timer. Corv gets sacked to the Psychic, and because Darkrai is finally low enough, that allows Rotom to Volt Switch out and pick up that KO. So now Pex back in. Aloe's got to take that poison. And we know that CJ is no stranger to crazy builds, but Calm Mind Aloe is a new one. Then you see, on turn 21, Rotom finally able to get off the trick, put an end to Alomomola trying to Wish Pass, and the Volt Switch plus the poison damage is going to take down the Mola, so it's going to be all up to Mimikyu, but as you can see, a second layer of Toxic Spikes was set up, so Mimikyu, now on the big timer, has to go for SEs to try to knock out Toxapex in time. But you know that Toxapex is easily going to be able to live a fairy type attack, gets up that recover, only takes 37% from a +2. So even though CJ reads the Baneful Bunker and gets up to +4, at this point Mimikyu only has a couple of turns before it's all over. And you see that Play Rough still isn't even doing enough to two-shot the Toxapex. So game 1 goes to Castelia City. We moved to game 2 early on. Serena gets off a rapid spin, but Baneful bunkered, so it's going to get poisoned. And then later on, Rotom is going to be able to pick up that KO with... Cell Battery is a new one, folks. We have never seen anything like that in league history. After the Serena goes down, Darkrai comes in, gets off a nasty plot, goes for the Ice Beam. Doxbun goes down in a single hit. But we already know that this Mo is scarfed, so Darkrai is going to take a healthy chunk of damage. But CJ correctly reads the Toxapex, gets off a great Psychic, takes down the biggest threat to the team. And so Rotom is going to be able to pick up the KO, but with a huge piece of Castelia City's defense missing, it's slim pickings for Raichu Alola and Iron Leaves to get off a lot of damage. Corviknight barely able to live the Thunderbolt, so Rotomo's going to be able to come in. CJ tries to predict the Volt Switch, but Ubu correctly predicts the Terra Ground, gets off that Leaf Storm, takes care of Raichu, but Iron Leaves is able to come in, and with the team this chunked, Rillaboom is going to go down, and there might not be much recourse for this Life Orb Iron Leaves that's getting HP back from the terrain. We see that Crocodile, again, remember that that thing is not Scarf, so it's going to go down in one hit to a Leaf Blade, even after the Intimidate. Rotomo gets off a Volt Switch, only doing 25%. Corviknight's going to go down on this turn to the CC, and it's only a matter of time before Kitakami is going to be able to even up this set. You see on turn 21, Shadow Sneak from Mimikyu able to take game 2. So on to game 3, Hoopa going for some Psychics. Corviknight U-turns out into Rillaboom, and then very curious decision making here from Kitakami. Goes for another Psychic, knowing that a single knockoff is going to take Hoopa out of this set completely. So early lead here for Castelia City. Then later on, Corviknight in on a triple axle from Serena, U-turns out and brings in the game 3 swap, the Scammer. Mamoswine, Ice Crash easily takes out Serena. Iron Leaves has to come in to revenge KO. Corviknight gets sacked to a close combat, but that's fine. Leaves now -1 on both defenses, and after the Leaf Blade KO on Darkspun is certainly low enough for a Mamoswine Ice Shard to pick up the KO here. So it's 4-3 in game 3. Mimikyu comes out, Pex comes in, and because CJ incorrectly tries to take care of the Mamoswine, Pex is able to get up a layer of Toxic Spikes, which means that Dark Ride's on the timer, so even though CJ gets the read on that Rotomo, it's only a matter of time, and we know that without setup, this team can't take care of Toxapex. But will it even matter? Rillaboom with a big Grassy Glide, critical hit on the Dark Ride, takes it out. Mimikyu comes in, Grassy Glide pops to the skies, playing rough into Shadow Sneak has to be enough to KO the Rillaboom in order for Kitakami to win this set. You see 43%, but thanks to that grassy terrain healing, it's not gonna matter. Shadow Sneak wasn't even strong enough to get the job done. Rillaboom picks up the KO with the Grassy Glide, and Raichu Alola just quite simply is not bulky enough to take a combination of Grassy Glide and one turn of poison, and Rillaboom doesn't even go down for good measure. So Castelia City picks up the big win on Versus Seeker. 4 KOs between Rillaboom and Toxapex. They move to 2-2 on the season, and Kitakami tries to bring out all the tricks, but unfortunately Cell Battery, Serena, and the efforts of Iron Leaves and Dark Ride just aren't enough to get the victory. Himawari versus Mount Steel, a big-time matchup in the Sapphire League. We move all the way to turn 7 on game 1. You know that back and forth jockeying for positioning is going to matter a lot, especially when you're fighting against a rain team. And here on turn 8, Himawari finds themselves in a pretty decent spot. Ogerpon Cornerstone goes for the Sword Stance. Tinkaton just low enough for the Ivy Cudgel to pick up the KO at +2. Moving on to turn 14, Himawari makes a switch out to Ogerpon Cornerstone, and Reen tries to call the bluff, stays in, ends up getting Horn Leech for their troubles. So Himawari goes up 6-4 early in game 1. Weavile comes in, has to land all 3 hits of the triple axle, and it does, taking out Ogerpon, which brings in Pelipper, so you know that the rain offense is going to be installed from here on out. But Pelipper actually U-turns out into Latios to go for the Terra Steel and start calm minding instead of just hitting what's in front of it. Tornadus tries to get ahead and go for the taunt, but Kobe wisely goes straight for the Weather Ball, picks up that KO on Tornadus. In comes Weavile. Reen tries to scare him out with the Sword Stance. Kobe holds his ground. Weather Ball picks up another KO, so it makes it 5-2 on turn 20. Latios has to Terra Fairy, go for the Scarfed Aura Spear, and it is able to pick off the Latios in 2 hits after blocking that Draco Meteor. But at this point, Barraskewda is going to be able to get off some big damage. Raging Bolts to switch in. Liquidation does a healthy 46 for Himawari, switches back out into Caesar, sacks it to the Spike, which allows Blissey to come in, and you know what Blissey does to special attackers. Latios, even with that Aura Spear, can only do a measly 15% before Blissey gets off a single Calm Mind, and that's enough to deter the end of game 1. We move to game 2, Breloom the swap, and immediately swings for the fences, goes for the CC on the Scizor, doesn't get the KO, procs the Citrus, and then actually lives the U-turn in response. So some heavy swings early in game 2, but it isn't until turn 16 where things finally start picking up motion again. Blissey gets the KO with the Seismic Toss, Weavile comes in response, Humalow pivots out into Scizor, which is low enough thanks to some prior chip and the rocks to go down to a triple axle from the Weavile. So in comes Barraskewda again under the rain, Gastron on the switch in, takes a healthy 45% from that close combat. You know that Bandit Barraskewda is doing a lot of damage. So Latios has to switch in afterwards and still takes a good 37% down to half after Stealth Rocks. Barraskewda switches out now that the rain is gone. Pelipper comes back in. Latios wisely goes straight for the Draco, doesn't want to mess around, ends up taking out Pelipper, so this is the last round of rain turns. And Humala goes Latios in response, so Mount Steel sacks the Breloom. Latios goes for a Calm Mind. Then comes Latios, goes for that Scarf Aura Sphere, but at +1 it's only doing 37%, so the Weather Ball from Latios able to take out the little sister. Weavile comes in response, but remakes the call, goes straight for the knockoff, takes out that Latios, not much recourse with all those hazards up on the screen. So Barraskewda has to come out, rain is very limited. Gastrodon gets sacked to the close combat after the Stealth Rock. But the rain is finally gone, which means that Weavile can come in. Barraskewda low, Blissey very low, gets sacked to the triple axle. And as you can see with the hazards up, that means that Ogerpon's not going to have its 30 available, and so long as all 3 hits of triple axle land, and they do, it means Ogerpon goes down, and between Weavile and Raging Bolt both potentially having priority, Barraskewda is not going to be able to get up enough damage before going down and tying the set at 1 apiece. So we move to game 3, turn 4, Ogerpon is in at very low health thanks to some prior chip from Raging Bolt, tries to go for the Horn Leech read, but there's no Gastrodon on the screen. Tinkaton stays in, gets the KO with the Gigaton Hammer, so it's going to send out Pelipper to try to get this rain back started. Gastrodon comes in on the Weather Ball, revealing that it was Storm Drain the whole time and not Sticky Hold, so as a result, Gastrodon's able to get up a Spike. Then later on, turn 14, Tinkaton's able to get up the rocks on a Scizor U-turn, so now the hazards are really starting to pile up here, which will allow Mount Steel to take control of the end game. Tinkaton goes for the knock on the Pelly, tries to read, goes for the Hurricane instead of the Weather Ball, ends up getting encored. So eventually Gastrodon does end up getting sacked to the Hurricane, but that is just going to allow Breloom to come in and start causing more damage. So Latios has to come out, take Stealth Rock tip, and we see that the Rock Tomb comes out. Great tech here from Mount Steel, ends up picking the KO on Latios, a big time swing. So now Barraskewda has to come out, Tinkaton ready to be sacked, and a bit of a mistake here from Humanoid going straight for the close combat instead of trying to go for that flip turn to keep the momentum going, so it's going to allow Breloom to come in, go straight for that Mach Punch. And while Pelipper is able to easily live it, it has to take more hazard chip, and it also means that Barraskewda is going to take out some chip when it switches back out. So Pelipper goes for the Roost. Weavile comes in after Raging Bolt, catches the Blissey, goes straight for the triple axle, and is able to take a good half of Blissey's HP off, easily lives the Seismic Toss. Pelipper has to come back in, gets knocked, but it's not going to be able to live the combination of a knockoff and a triple axle unless you get the single, but at this point, Pelipper U-turns out into Barraskewda, and at this point, Mount Steel is content to let Barraskewda go for a regular hit. You see the liquidation, which means it's time for Breloom to come in and start Mach Punching again. Barraskewda goes down. Scizor comes in. All those hazards means that there's no way in hell this thing lives a Mach Punch. And so we're down to just a Pelipper that immediately dies to the rocks, and a Blissey which is in no way, shape, or form healthy enough or bulky enough to take a Mach Punch, and so Mount Steel picks up the nice 2-1 victory over Humalao. Weavile, Breloom combined for 9 KOs, Tinkaton 5 assists. Mount Steel moves to 3-2 on the season, Humalao dropping back down to 500. Koroway and Goldenrod. Koroway coming into this matchup 0-4, looking for their first win of the season, and this was quite the struggle. We move all the way to turn 12 in game 1. Meloetta gets up a sub. Raptor U-turn breaks it. Meloetta gets off a lot of damage with a luring voice on the Samurai, but stays in and goes down to the Ceaseless Edge. Normally Meloetta faster, so that might be a defensive variant. Later on turn 22, Metagross gets a big knockoff on a Galar, switches out into Mandibuzz to block the Poltergeist after having already gotten its item knocked. But on the Roost, Goldenrod makes a correct read, goes straight for the Dynamic Punch, gets that confusion, and then Mandibuzz hits itself, which allows Galar to pick up the KO and give themselves a 6-4 lead. Cinderace comes in, gets the Revenge KO with the Pyro Ball, which sends in Raikou. Koroway goes into Metagross, and then the Raikou Terra Waters goes straight for that Scald, does a nice 41%, and a second one will pick up the KO to put the lead at 5-3. Later on turn 33, Cinderace comes in, gets strength out by the Sinistcha, so has to U-turn out, goes into Mudsdale, gets hit by a Hex, and then the Matcha Gotcha afterwards is going to do just enough damage to pick up the KO on Mudsdale to further the Goldenrod lead. Gengar comes out, tricks the Sinistcha, revealing that it is in fact Scarf, but Goldenrod correctly switches to Hex, picks up the KO. It's now 5-1, and even though 2 Cinderace Power Balls are in fact enough to get the KO on Sinistcha, has to be banded with that type of damage, the Scarf Raikou is going to be able to come out, pick up that last KO with another Scald, and give Goldenrod game 1 in the set. Game 2 leads Cinderace and Golurk, and Koroway says, this time I'm dictating the pace, immediately gets off the Sucker Punch and KOs Golurk from full. We don't see more motion until turn 16. Mudsdale, already poisoned, takes some more damage from Muck. Raptor comes in, blocks the EQ, and Mudsdale goes down to the poison to tie this thing up at 5. Gengar comes in and picks up the KO with the Scarf Thunderbolt, so revealing that coverage. Later on turn 21, Samurai tries to Ice Beam the Mandibuzz to pick up the KO. Not enough. Mandibuzz U-turns out, taking out Samurai. Cinderace comes in, and because we know that this thing is choice banned, Muck is barely able to live the first one, is able to get off that poison touch, but it's not going to live the second, and with Raikou and Sinistcha remaining, Goldenrod is going to find themselves in a very hard position to win. Strength Saps on the incoming Mandibuzz, and then the Matcha Gotcha, which might not have killed, misses anyway, so Mandibuzz is able to get healthy, and Goldenrod concedes game 2 with a tasteful inactivity loss. So we move to game 3, Mudsdale Raikou the leads. Raikou Terras immediately, but still goes for the Volt Switch, predicting the Terra Water from the Mudsdale. Koroway stays course and gets off some nice damage with some EQ to set the tone for game 3. Then on turn 11, Metagross switches in on a Matcha Gotcha, affords it an opportunity to get a knockoff, and an already damaged Muck goes down to give Koroway the game 3 lead. Golurk comes in response. Metagross gets off the knockoff, gets some good damage before going down to the Poltergeist to tie up this game. Then, a few turns later, Meloetta comes in on the Golurk Dynamic Punch, gets confused, but does in fact not hit itself in confusion, gets off the Shadow Ball, takes the KO on Golurk, which brings in Mienshao. Mandibuzz comes in. Mienshao U-turns out, does not get the KO on Mandibuzz, is going to bring in Samurai H, and then goes for the flip turn, so Mandibuzz staying in, goes down. Rocks are already up on Koroway's side, which means it's time to go for the end game. Samurai, already noticeably chipped, goes down to a Gengar Dazzling Gleam. Sinistcha has to come in. Meloetta comes in response on the Sinistcha Calm Mind. Goldenrod trying to go for game right then and there. Shadow Ball does 46. Matcha Gotcha gonna heal back a lot thanks to that big root. But crucially on turn 22, The Shadow Ball does not get the KO, but does get the Split Death drop, so even though the Strength Sap is going to heal Sinister up a lot, it's not going to be able to live the third Meloetta Shadow Ball. It's down to Mienshao and Raikou. So Mienshao comes in, Meloetta Terra Fairies to live the U-turn, and Raikou already chipped thanks to that Mudsdale EQ on turn 1. Goes down to an Alluring Voice, so it's 4v1. Can Mienshao pull off the miracle comeback? The CC is enough to take out the Meloetta, but with 2 faster mods in the back, because we know the Mienshao is Life Orb, it's not going to be able to pull this off. And the Cinderace Flare Blitz for good measure, just to make sure it doesn't miss, will hand Koroway their first win of the season. Cinderace leading the way, 5 KOs, 9 points. Goldenrod dropping to 1-3, the first time in Dom's career that he's ever gone as poor as 1-3 in any 4-game stretch. Big Bluff versus Mauville, 3-3 versus 4-1. Right out the gate, Donphan, Lycanroc, Dusk the leads, and it's Sash Dusk, but that is a banded Donphan doing 85% with a knockoff before picking up the first KO of the battle. Flygon comes in, gets off the U-turn, picks up the KO in retaliation. Azu comes in after the KO, telling you that it's likely AV, but it takes a huge critical hit, 71% on the discharge, and because it's not banded, only does 50% with the play rough and dealing another 21 with Aqua Jet before going down to a discharge. In comes Bisharp, gets off the Sucker Punch, and it's 4-4 after just 6 turns of play. And then a huge play from Big Bluff, Terra Darking, and then staying with the Sucker Punch, catching the Zoroark H. Golden Go comes in and tricks on the Sucker, but unfortunately misses the Focus Blast right after, so a Throat Chop is going to take out Golden Go even without the ban. Flygon comes in, EQs, only does about 45%, takes 78 from the Throat Chop, and then doesn't pick up the KO, so Bisharp picks up another one, leaving just Reuniclus, which barely holds on. After that Throat Chop is able to knock off the Bisharp, but it's not gonna matter. Venusaur is gonna come in, pick up the last KO, and that is a game 1 13-turn victory for Big Bluff. We move now to game 2, same leads, Donphan and Dusk. Dusk gets up the rocks, Donphan goes for Earthquake this time, and this is where Salame outplays Keith. Gets off the Endeavor on the Azu switch, and then the Accelerock for the KO. Instead of Keith just holding his ground, he expected the Flygon, didn't happen. Bisharp's able to pick up the Sucker Punch KO after, but Crawdon's gonna be able to come in, easily lives the Sucker, and then blows out the candles. Bisharp immediately goes down to that close combat. Wake comes in retaliation. Reuniclus comes in, and it's going to take 86 to a Specs Draco, so immediately switches out to Zapdos, which still takes 57 even at -2, but of course because of the special attack drops, Zapdos is going to be able to roost that right back up. Donphan takes 58 from the Hurricane to get up rocks, and then goes into Venusaur on the U-turn, which allows Golden Go to come in. So that Spec Shadow Ball is going to be looking for a KO, barely misses out, and then the Venusaur reveals Sunny Day. So Venusaur gets a little bit of chip on the Giga Drain before going down to a Shadow Ball. That's going to allow Walking Wake to come in. It's going to outspeed the entire function, but maybe a bit of a miscalculation here from Big Buff. Goes for the Draco Meteor instead of the Steam Eruption. So even though Walking Wake is going to be able to pick up 2 KOs here on Golden Go and Reuniclus, Zapdos is going to be able to come in, forces the Wake out, forces the Donphan in, which does block the discharge, but it is not Heat Rock Venusaur, and the Hurricane is going to take out the Donphan, so Wake has to do all the work itself, and is going to miss the Draco Meteor for good measure. Zapdos gets the para with the discharge, so Walking Wake goes down. It's all up to Ceruledge. First discharge, doesn't para, SD. Second discharge, also doesn't para, but goes for another SD, and so unfortunately Big Buff is going to go down and make this a 3-game set. Donphan once again the lead, but this time it's Galvantula, the switching for Reuniclus, trade hazards. On turn 7, Zapdos misses a big Hurricane on the Venusaur, which is able to get up the Sunny Day. The next Hurricane is going to land even in the sun. That's 50% accuracy, but that's going to allow Walking Wake to come right back in. Lives the discharge easily, doesn't get parried, gets the KO with the Draco Meteor. In comes Golden Go, already severely chipped. Big Bluff goes into Bisharp to get that Defiant boost, and to only take 42% from the Shadow Ball. Wise plays here. Crawdad's going to come in, but the Throat Chop's not going to be able to pick up the KO, just 75%, and because of the webs, Bisharp, now slower, goes down to the Crawdad close combat. In comes Donphan, and the Ice Shard revealed is going to pick up the KO on Crawdad. So in comes Galvantula. Azu comes in response, takes that Volt Switch. So Marlboro goes in to Lightning Rock Dusk, but maybe a misplay here, goes with the Accelerock instead of the straight up KO. Thought the Aqua Jet might have been coming instead. Azumarill picks up that KO with the Liquidation. Flygon EQs in response, which sends in the Donphan. But at this point, with a quad weak to Ice Mon left and a severely chipped Golden Go, Ice Shard is going to be able to pick up all 3 KOs. Galvantula goes down to the big crit. Golden Go goes down to the next Ice Shard, and then Flygon definitely is not living, and so Big Bluff with the big win. Double banded action. Donphan and Bisharp both 5 KOs and 8 points, picks up the victory, finishes the week 4-3, and snaps Mauville's 3-game win streak in the process. Lavender Town continues their great start to the season, moves to 4-0 with the 2-0 victory over Humalau, counters Barraskewda with Choice Scarf, Swift Swim, Overquill. Nico back at it again in the team builder. Littleroot still looking for their first win, unable to take it over Heart Home Weezing G, 12 points in a defensive masterclass. Sky Pillar wins 2-1 over Corway thanks to getting their 70 and Corway missing theirs. Magma Storm landing, Focus Blast missing the difference. Cresselia 13 points in the big win. Speaking of defensive performances, Toxapex puts up 12 points of their own as Castelia City moves back to 500 in their victory over Goldenrod. Back and forth between Big Bluff and Kitakami, heavy hitters going at it, but Big Bluff ends up winning the Sacrifice War. Cleavor putting up 11 points as the Bisharps continued their good start to the season, moving to 3-1 after their big win over Kyodai. Rose Tower also continues their good start to the season, and Limber Ditto ends up proving just how unfortunate it can get for Heart Home. They fall 2-1 to the Copper Rajas. Heart Home's bad week continues, unable to stymie Cresselia and Heatran, falling to Sky Pillar 2-1. Mauville able to squeak out a win over Corway thanks to Flygon barely living the Gengar Shadow Ball, cleans up with that Scarf EQ. Galvantula 10 points in the win. Spear Pillar still undefeated, moves to 6-0 on the season with a dominant Game 3 victory over Rose Tower. Glamora 15 total points, a complete showcase of its skills in the win. Then finally, Rose Tower finishes the week 5-2 with the big Ruby League win over Anastar Masquerada, the Icon, 9 total points in the victory. Alright, let's get into this week's league coverage. There was some notable movement in the standings this week, and the stats leaderboard also shows that it was once again another competitive battle for Pokemon of the Week. We've got a decent bit of movement in the Ruby League standings after 2 weeks, but remaining at the top are the Lavender Town Pranksters. 7-0 record, went undefeated in week 2, and on top of that went a perfect 8-0 in games. Their game count still has just the 1 loss and a plus 52 win differential, again most in the league. Rose Tower sits at the number 2 at 5-2, went 3-1 on the week, and just 1 loss to the best team in the Sapphire League, so a good week for them. Sky Pillar also went 3-1 on the week, so they move up to the 3 spot, now 4-3, riding at 3-game win streak, back above 500. Big Bluff also sits at 4-3, went 2-2 on the week, so they currently sit at spot number 4. Negative win diff, but again, as long as you're winning your matches, it doesn't really matter how it goes down. Anastar also went 2-2 on the week. They sit at 3-4, and a very even 9-9 in games. Corway picked up 2 wins this week, so they don't have to worry about a win this season. They currently sit at the number 6 spot, 2-5, as well as Haoli and Kitakami, also at 2-5 each. Haoli went 1-3 on the week. Unfortunately for Kitakami, went 0-4. Some notable losses. Granted, there were some extraneous circumstances that led to that. We know that Kitakami has the ability to bounce back, but they will have to make that bounce back in the first place. The top dog of the Sapphire League has also remained steady. Spear Pillar also 7-0, so now there's a bit of a race going on to see which team can remain undefeated the longest. 14-3 game count, plus 40 win differential. Not quite as strong as Lavender Town, but 7-0 is still 7-0. Mauville sits at the 2, 4-2-1, had to settle for a draw with Castelia City, but by virtue of that draw, they still remain the number 2 team in the Sapphire League standings. Mount Steel and Humalau both sit at 4-3, both went 2-2 over the course of the week. However, Mount Steel had the head-to-head win over Humalau, so they currently sit at the 3, while Humalau sits at the 4. The aforementioned Castelia City Namaswine sit at 3-3-1, had a good week, 2-1-1, and as a result, they move up to 5 in the standings. Heart Home had a rough week, 1-3. They currently sit at 2-5 at that number 6 spot. Goldenrod also another rough week, 1-3. Their only win coming against Dom's client Keith, so they currently sit at the number 7. Little Root at the bottom, 0-7, still looking for their first win. We will see how long it takes for them to finally get into the win column. The top 3 teams in the Week 2 edition of the Power Rankings all remain in their spots from Week 1. Lavender Town still the number 1 team. Their offense has been meeting their potential on all cylinders. The myriad of setup sweepers that they've had have proven to be just as deadly as advertised. Spear Pillar still remains at 2. And in their case, their balanced approach might be even stronger than their hyper offense approach. Rose Tower still sits at number 3, Meowscarada emerging as a true MVP contender for that team. We will see where that mon finishes at the end of the season stats-wise. Mauville moves up to number 4. Their offensive core is triumphing. They've really got a solid offensive style down between Lead Lycanroc and heavy hitters such as Crawdaunt, Zork, Ace to Confuse, and Confound Bonds, Iron Valiant, Golden Go, Revervoom, you name them. Humalau drops down just 1 spot, but their final offense is still working well, with or without the rain. Barraskewda, obviously under rain, has been excelling, but Haxorus is still on that roster, finding ways to make it work like Humalau has done season after season. Sky Pillar moves up to number 6. While they have been getting lucky, their defensive approach is working for the time being. That's why they sit above 500 and currently find themselves at number 6. Mount Steel drops down 1 spot, down to 7, but they have been finding some consistency. Emphasis on some, but again, the little steps are going to add up, and we will see that team, presumably, start making a real push when it all comes together. Big Bluff moves up 1 spot to the 8th spot. And their all-in offensive approach is starting to pay dividends, whether it be bringing a bunch of banded mons or bringing the sun manually to allow Walking Wake to thrive. Big Bluff is starting to find a way to really make this offense shake. Anastar moves up 2 spots, up to number 9. And while they don't sit at a necessarily poor spot, they have just 1 win inside their own division, so if this team really wants to elevate into the top half, they're going to have to find some marquee wins against the Ruby League. Castelia City moves up 3 spots to number 10. Their defensive core has proven to be pretty sound. Toxapex and Corviknight and Screamtail are really elevating this team. They currently sit at 500. We'll see if that trend can continue. Koi moves up 5 spots, the biggest riser of the week. Their counterplay has been getting better, and they're starting to find their way around some wins. Obviously, 0-3 is not how you want to start the season, but it's never about how you start, and Corway is 2-2 since then. Heart Home drops down to number 12. The key point being that they have been very misfortunate in week 2, but that's only temporary. The game that we play dictates that everyone's going to be lucky and unlucky at some point, and Heart Home's bad streak is not going to continue. We know this for a fact. Goldenrod moves up 1 spot to 13, still trying to find their identity, had a lot of roster turnover after the first week, and we'd like to think that they're going to experience a lot more, but for the time being, they're still trying to find themselves. Howley drops down 2 spots to number 14, gotta remain focused. There were some mental errors, play-wise, team-building-wise. Howley is still a young franchise. Dancy is still learning how to get acclimated, so time heals all wounds. For now, Howley's still struggling quite a bit. Kitakami, the biggest dropper, dropping down all the way to 15. Like we mentioned before, there are some extraneous circumstances that affected the week. So the key point here is just weather this storm. It is going to pass, and we've seen from season to season Kitakami improve. We know that they are capable of being a playoff caliber team like they were last season. It's just a matter of bouncing back. And then down to the final spot, you've got Littleroot. Just gotta limit the overthinking, whether that be in the game or on the team. There might be a little bit of noise going on mentally for Littleroot. And we have a special announcement because they have a plan to address this.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Izzy, General Manager of the Littleroot Time Bandits. You might have noticed we started this season with a smashing 1 single match won in 4 sets, which might be among the worst in NWBA history. In order to get out of this temporary slump, our team has come up with a revolutionary new strategy. Just fucking pick a Titan. That's right, after studying up on last season's Embertown Rose games, we decided we would just be fucking picking a Titan. We will pick it in game 1s, we will pick it in game 2s, and we will pick it in game 3s, we will pick it in the snow, we will pick it in the rain, we will pick it in the streets, and we will pick it in the sheets. We will not swap it out unless I vulnerable set again. In which case, if I fuck up the Titan set specifically, and when I'm swapping it out, I pledge to give 1 sub in both Dom and Vasser's channels. That's right, if I fuck up, I will cough up, and we will pick it every time unless you ban it. In which case, we'll find something. That's all. See you on the field.
It was another competitive week for the stats leaderboard. Latios of Himalao finished as the KO leader with 15. Meloetta of Coralway with 13, coming in second. Darkrai of Kitakami and Galade of Rose Tower both put up 12. And then Cresselia of Skypillar, Excadrill of Howley, and Toxapex of Castelia City all had 11. Speaking of the number 11, Lycanroc Dusk led once again in assists this week with 11, but that was a tie with Tinglu of Rose Tower. Glamora of Spear Pillar notched 8, while Heatran of Sky Pillar, Screamtail of Castelia City, and Tinkaton of Mount Steel all put up 7. Latios also finished as the points leader with 24, Meloetta coming in second with 21, and a 4-way tie with 20, including Arcanine of Spirit Pillar, the aforementioned Cresselia, the aforementioned Heatran, and the aforementioned Toxapex. A pretty productive week for defensive mods. I like to see it. Terrakion of Coralway finished with the most points per game with 6 flat this week. Glamora put up 3.6. Kyurem of Lavender Town putting up 3.5. Finally seeing Kyurem on the big board. Darkrai with 3.16 repeating, rounded up to 3.2 of course. And then Sinistcha of Goldenrod and Thunderous Therian of Anastar both putting up a flat 3 points per game. Terrakion also had the KOs per game title this week with a flat 3, makes sense, 3 KOs, 2 points each means 6 points. Darkrai of Kitakami back again with 2 KOs per game. Sinistcha with 1.8, and then Kyurem and Lokix of Littleroot both putting up 1.75. Your Week 2 Pokemon of the Week in the Ruby League was actually Heatran of the Sky Pillar Delta Dragons. 15 combined KOs and assists. Put up 20 points, which was tied for 4th in the NWBA as a whole. 2.9 points per game, was 4th in the league, and a KDA of 5. It's not often you see a Mon that doesn't really focus on the offensive side win Mon of the week, but it was a very competitive week over in the Ruby League, and Heatran, the stalwart, the former MVP and a multiple-time All-NBA Mon, did eventually earn its first ever Pokemon of the Week award. As for the Sapphire League, Humalao doubles down, wins their 2nd straight Pokemon of the Week award, this time with Latios. 15 KOs and 24 points both led the entire league this week. It's 2.7 points per game and 1.7 KOs per game, both ranked 3rd in the Sapphire League. Latios was going to get done in a multitude of ways. Calm Mind with Luster Purge and being Spec/Scarf, even Life Orb. This Mon is one of the most threatening offensive Mons in the league, always has been, and it's nice to see that it was extremely productive for Humalao this week and ended up walking away with its first ever Pokemon of the Week award.
What is out the mud? We got
ZU moment of the week.
What the fuck was that?
You're smoking dust.
Despite the league's best interest, ZU moment of the week is back for another round. This time we bring you Howley versus Mount Steel. Now, obviously, mistakes happen in this league. We've seen them time and time again, and sometimes teams make the same mistakes, or at the very least mistakes that other people have made. If you look over at the Howley Hydras, you will notice on their team there are 3 UUs present on their roster: Excadrill, Hydrapple, and Keldeo. This is, as it always has been, illegal. We saw it last week when Castelia City took on Littleroot. Ubo brought 3 OUs, but AZ, gracious as he is, decided not to take the game. In this circumstance, this is a bit of a two-headed dragon, and you'll see why. Because the set and the game is still going. Not only did Danchi bring 3 UUs after somebody already made this mistake, but Reen doesn't catch it. So you see, we take it all the way to the end of the game. It looks like Danchi is about to get a win. And then Reen finally notices, as she's sitting thinking about what she wants her swap to be, she finally notices the illegal team comp. So not only does she get all the pertinent information of what set she's fighting against, but she also gets the game anyway in a game that she realistically was supposed to lose. It's always fascinating to see how these things shake out, but this truly is the first time, not even in recent NWBA memory, maybe in NWBA history, that someone has called someone else out for an illegal team, but it took the entire game to get there. So hopefully Danchi starts really sticking his nose in the rulebook, but Reen, sister, you've been in this league for too long. You gotta pay more attention to these things. Or at the very least, just beat the opponent's ass so bad that it doesn't matter if they bring 3 OUs or UUs or something, I don't know. Alright, no more avoiding the elephant in the room. Let's get into free agency and trades over the course of week 2. 32 total transactions is a Generation 9 record for the NWBA, and the only reason it is not more outstanding is, of course, the extremely scuffed Season 4 when only 10 teams were around and free agency was closer to a revolving door than anything. That being said, there were a lot of notable movements and decisions being made in free agency, in the trade market this week, so it's not like these moves were only made just for the sake of being made. The first move of free agency starts with Mount Steel releasing Braylon to sign Cyclizar. This one a bit of a surprise given how good a performance Braylon put together for them over the week, but Cyclizar provides some good speed control and the ability to remove hazards very well. Goldenrod releases Umbreon for Empoleon, effectively does the same thing as far as archetypes, but Empoleon can pivot out as well as put up hazards. And Goldenrod opted to make it a Terra Captain with typings in water and ground, given that they had points that they never used. Sky Pillar then picked up Umbreon, dropping Cresselia, again a mon that performed very well for them over the week, but Umbreon and Cresselia do effectively the same things, except that Umbreon can also toxic opponents as opposed to put up paralysis, and can also Wish Pass in addition to just being able to Moonlight. The first trade of the week came when Humalao surprisingly traded away Latios to Kitakami for Arcanine H. This one was a big surprise. Latios was a big piece of Humalao's offense, being a Terra Captain, and while Arcanine H does provide a great physical attacker, Humalao is also running a rain team, so why on earth would Humalao trade away such a brilliant piece of their offense to Kitakami, who, for what it's worth, can benefit from having either mon on their roster? So, after the big trade, Humalao goes back to work, releases Haxorus for itself? Actually, this release happened before the Latios trade, and the big reason why they made that trade was that they can bring Haxorus back as a Terra Captain, rocking the types Ground and Steel much like they did last season. Littleroot gets rid of Grafai for Tauros, Paldean, Aqua. Grafai is only really a gimmick more than anything else. Tauros, Paldean, Aqua at the very least can be a good setup attacker and some emergency defense. Mount Steel gets rid of Tinkaton for Volcanion, a surprise for sure. Tinkaton, a great defensive Pokemon, but you cannot deny the breaking power that Volcanion offers to any team. Spear Pillar makes a bunch of different moves. This particular roster spot goes all over the place, so we'll just mention that they dropped Cobalion for Coaster and really get into the details later. Kitakami drops Uxie for Duraludon. Uxie an all-rounder, but Kitakami had a glaring weakness against fairy types, and Duraludon at the very least can punish them with stab steel attacks, even if it is neutral to fairy hits. Back to Humalao, they drop Ogerpon Cornerstone for Hatterene. Hatterene offers some good defense. We've seen this mon succeed on weather teams in the past, particularly Sun, so it should not be an issue for Humalao to make this mon work well for them. Mauville then picks up the recently released Tinkaton, dropping Skeledirge as a result, figures that the special defensive wall was more important than the physically defensive. Goldenrod releases Sinister for Armor Rouge. Just didn't really like the way Sinister felt on their roster, felt that Armor Rouge could be a better pickup for them. Can't really fault the team for doing that. Anastar then immediately picks up Sinister, dropping Gyarados in the process. Mount Steel makes another move, a lot more surprising this time around, dropping Raging Bolt for Quaquaval. We like to think that the speed that Quaquaval can provide, especially after an Aqua Step, is why Mount Steel would rather make this decision. They would rather a mon that's better at snowballing rather than one that just immediately pokes holes in teams. But Spear Pillar said that's fine, we'll take Raging Bolt anyway, and drops Glamora, so despite how well Glamora performed for them, they have a much more immediate breaker on their team. Littleroot then also drops Glastrier for Tatsugiri, figures that Glastrier pretty much never showed up and was only ever going to be useful when they went full snow. Tatsugiri at the very least can provide some value outside of it, and as a result Tatsugiri made a Terra Captain with typings in Dragon and Fairy. Corway then dropped Araquanid for Inteleon. Araquanid was fairly strong for them when they made it an attacker, but figured that Inteleon's speed tier, as well as the fact that it is immediately threatening, would prove to be much more fruitful for them down the line. We then had our second trade of the week, Corway and Spear Pillar swapping Pheasantipity for Iron Thorns. These mods exist in different tiers, but they count as EXs for both of those teams. Corway citing that Pheasantipity just didn't really feel right for them to use. They didn't really like the way the mon functioned, and figured that the potential breaking power of Iron Thorns could be useful. And because of them dropping Araquanid, they actually had Terra Points available to make Iron Thorns a Terra Captain. Ironically enough, choosing the types in Ground and Flying, much like Spear Pillar did with Iron Thorns before. But Spear Pillar wasn't done yet, and their second trade of the week and third overall in week 2 would prove to be the craziest. Raging Bolt sent over to Kitakami in exchange for Darkrai. We all know how good Darkrai is. The special attack, the speed, the coverage. Why on earth would Kitakami trade away their first round pick, a mon that they had to win a lottery coin flip for? Well, in their eyes, getting Raging Bolt was absolutely worth it because of one thing. Raging Bolt is the only mon remaining in the entire game that has access to Rising Voltage, a 70 base power electric type move that does double damage under electric terrain. So Kitakami is going all in on electric terrain, and they are willing to part with a mon as good as Darkrai to get it done. For our final batch of free agency moves, we go back to Kitakami, releases Mimikyu to sign Torterra, figures that Torterra has got better bulk, Shell Smash is a better sweeping opportunity than just trying to SD up with Mimikyu, and so Torterra is the new Terra Captain on the block for Kitakami, with types in Fire and Rock. Very interesting decision, we'll see how Kitakami opts to utilize those. Himawari continues their work, releasing Vileplume for Jolteon, so after dispatching of both Latios and Raging Bolt, they figure to get Jolteon onto the roster as their newest special attacker. Coralway opts to drop Terrakion for Breloom. Breloom hits about as hard and has a priority move on top of that, so they figure that's better than having Terrakion. Kitakami continues to overhaul the roster, getting rid of Gargasol for Ogerpon Cornerstone, a faster, stronger rock type, one that's actually offensive and not just a mon that gets most of its value out of pressing Salt Cure. Rose Tower gets rid of Gallade, who also had a great week, so that's another mon that had a good performance in week 2 that got dropped on its head regardless, to sign Terrakion. They like what Terrakion offers to the table and figures that the speed is better than Galade's, and that's why it's on the roster. Spear Pillar drops Cloyster. Initially they picked up Regidrago, but then revealed that it was all part of their master plan to drop Regidrago to put Cloyster back on the roster and actually use up their Terra points that they had left over, making Cloyster a Terra Captain in types with Rock and Ghost. Rock obviously to benefit Rock Blast, and then Ghost to block Spinners. Big Bluff releases Scrafty to sign Espeon, so a mon that's going to offer them a lot more firepower. Obviously a Sun team is in no way, shape, or form lacking that, but they would rather have Espeon than the slow setup that Scrafty provides, making Espeon a Terra Captain in Psychic and Fairies, capitalizing off that stab, and then obviously we know how well Fairy works with Psychic. Sky Pillar drops Snorlax for Slowbro G. Snorlax did not play any games, and the faction figured that the physical defense was more needed than the special defense, so Slowbro G, the newest Terra Captain for that team, with types in Water and Fairy. Mount Steel then gets rid of Gastrodon for Quagsire, two mons that do very similar things. Quagsire, of course, has Unaware as an ability and offers a little bit more in the matter of utility, being able to set up all 3 kinds of hazards, as well as Press Toxic and Encore. Rose Tower also opts to swap their PUs, getting rid of Vikavolt for Lantern, a mon that we have not seen in NWBA history up to this point in time. So Lantern will make its NWBA debut, and it will do so as a Terra Captain with types in Ghost and Fairy. And then lastly, maybe the biggest move by any team that wasn't a trade, Kitakami opts to get rid of Hoopa for Pincurchin, making it a Terra Captain with types in Water and Flying. So if you thought that the electric terrain thing was just a gimmick, we were really serious when we say they're going all in on this affair. Alright, we finally got the elephant out of the room, taking up all that damn space. Let's get into our final segment of the day, the schedule and Versus Secret lineup for week 3. As we take a look at the week 3 schedule, another very interesting batch of games in a full week. Over in the Ruby League, you've got Lavender Town facing off against Big Bluff, the 1 versus the 4 currently. Holy has matchups against Corway and Kitakami, so if they want to make it out of the cellar, now is the time to do it. Spear Pillar takes on Little Root, 7-0 versus 0-7. If there was ever a time for an upset, it would be that one. You've also got Castelia City versus Mount Steel, 2 teams currently fighting for good seeding over in the Sapphire League. More interesting interleague matches, you got Lavender Town and Heart Home. Of course, Nico and Ballheat have a very storied history in this league. The team to watch out for, Mauville, a very loaded schedule. Humalau, Spear Pillar, Sky Pillar, and Lavender Town, all 4 teams with winning records currently. How do the Mimikyu handle such a rough stretch? And coming up tonight, you know that we've got Versus Seeker on deck. Another 3 matches. Ruby League tilt, Sky Pillar versus Anastar. Both teams currently in the top 5 of the Ruby League standings. A very important matchup. Sky Pillar to stay above 500 while Anastar tries to get back to it. The top 2 teams in the Ruby League currently, Rose Tower at 5-2 and Lavender Town still undefeated. That is a big time tilt. And then the battle for Toronto, version 3, Heart Home and Humalau will go head to head once again. They battled under the primetime like before. It should be another entertaining bout for sure. Alright friends, that's going to wrap it up for today's episode. Thank you all for watching. I've been your host, King Vasser. Coming up next, Versus Seeker Week 3, another triple header coming your way. We'll see you soon.